Hi, everyone. Welcome to Softly Spoken English. I'm Sophia. This is the place where you'll learn real English for real conversations, the kind of English you'll actually use. So, whether you're listening on your way to work, making dinner, or just relaxing with a cup of coffee, I'm really glad you're here. All right, let's get into today's episode. You already know how this works. No boring grammar lectures. Just real English, explained the way people actually talk. Today's episode is all about something you'll use almost every time you meet someone new, talking about your personality. Because sooner or later, someone will ask you a simple question. What are you like? Or maybe, how would you describe yourself? They're simple questions, but for many English learners, they create a surprisingly big problem. Suddenly you know hundreds of words, but you can't think of a single one to describe yourself naturally. Maybe you know words like nice or friendly, maybe you learned shy years ago, but real conversations usually go a little deeper than that. People don't just want a list of adjectives, they want to understand who you are. And today, that's exactly what we're going to practice together. Here's something interesting. Talking about your personality isn't really about vocabulary, it's about confidence. When you can describe yourself naturally, conversations become easier. Job interviews feel less stressful. Making new friends feels more comfortable. Even introducing yourself becomes much more enjoyable. Let's start with one of the most common personality words in English, friendly. If someone is friendly, they're kind, welcoming, and easy to talk to. Imagine someone who smiles when they meet new people, remembers your name, and makes you feel comfortable almost immediately. That's a friendly person. You could say, "I'm pretty friendly once you get to know me." Or maybe, "My coworkers are all really friendly." Notice that friendly doesn't mean someone talks all the time. It simply means people enjoy being around them because they create a warm atmosphere. Now let's look at another very common word, outgoing. This is someone who enjoys meeting people, starting conversations, and being around others. Outgoing people usually feel comfortable in social situations. They don't mind speaking first, introducing themselves, or joining a group conversation. You might hear someone say, "She's really outgoing," or maybe, "I'm not very outgoing, especially around people I don't know." That's perfectly natural English. And here's something important. Being outgoing isn't better than being quiet. They're simply different personalities. In fact, that brings us to another useful word, introverted. An introverted person usually enjoys quiet moments, smaller groups, and spending time alone to recharge. That doesn't mean they're shy. And this is one of the biggest misunderstandings people have, even in their first language. One of the easiest ways to keep a conversation going is by talking about personality. People love describing themselves, their friends, their family, and even their coworkers. It's something we do all the time without even thinking about it. But here's the interesting part. Many English learners know lots of personality words. They just don't know when people actually use them. Today, we're going to change that. Let's start with a very common question. How would you describe yourself? You'll hear this question in job interviews, first dates, language exchanges, and even casual conversations. If someone asks you this, don't panic. You don't need a long answer. Just choose 2 or 3 adjectives and explain them with a simple example. For example, "I'm pretty friendly. I enjoy meeting new people, and I love having good conversations." Or, "I'm quite organized. I like making plans and keeping everything in order." Notice something. The adjective is only the beginning. The real communication happens when you explain why. Let's learn our first personality adjective, friendly. Friendly means you're easy to talk to. You smile. You enjoy meeting people. You make others feel comfortable. It's one of the nicest compliments someone can give you. Imagine meeting someone for the first time. After talking for a few minutes, they say, "You seem really friendly." That feels good, doesn't it? And it's incredibly common. You'll hear this word everywhere. Now let's compare it with another word, kind. People often confuse friendly and kind, but they aren't exactly the same thing. A friendly person enjoys talking to people. A kind person enjoys helping people. Of course, someone can be both, but they're different qualities. Here's a simple example. My neighbor is really friendly. Maybe she always says hello. Maybe she starts conversations. Maybe she smiles every morning. Now, my neighbor is really kind. Maybe she helped you when you were sick. Maybe she brought you dinner. Maybe she looked after your dog. Can you hear the difference? Now let's talk about a word that's becoming more and more common, confident. Being confident doesn't mean thinking you're better than everyone else. It simply means believing in yourself. Someone who's confident isn't afraid to express an opinion. They trust their abilities. And people usually enjoy being around confident people. But be careful. There's another word that sounds similar, arrogant. These two words are not the same. A confident person believes in themselves. An arrogant person believes they're better than everyone else. It's a very important difference. Imagine these two introductions. I'm confident because I've worked really hard. Sounds great. Now listen to this. I'm better than everyone else here. That doesn't sound confident. That sounds arrogant. English speakers notice this difference immediately, and using the right word can completely change how people see you. Let's learn another word you'll hear all the time, easygoing. If someone is easygoing, they're relaxed and flexible. They don't get upset over small problems, and they're usually happy to go with the flow. Imagine planning a trip with friends. One person says, "I don't mind where we eat." Another says, "Whatever works for everyone." That's an easygoing person. It's a wonderful compliment, and people use it all the time. Now let's compare that with someone who's always stressed. Maybe they overthink every decision. Maybe small changes completely ruin their day. You probably wouldn't describe that person as easygoing. So, if someone asks you, "What's your best friend like?" you could say, "He's really easygoing, nothing seems to bother him." That sounds completely natural and very common in everyday English. Now let's move to something a little more advanced. Could have. This structure talks about a possibility that existed in the past but never became reality. For example, I could have gone to the party, but I stayed home. You had the chance. You had the ability, but you didn't do it. That's the key idea behind could have. It always looks back at a choice or opportunity that wasn't taken. Here's another example. She could have told me the truth, but she didn't. The opportunity was there, but the action never happened. Or, we could have taken a taxi, but we decided to walk. Native speakers use this structure all the time when talking about missed opportunities, different decisions, or small regrets. Once you start noticing it, you'll hear it everywhere. A lot of learners avoid could have because it looks complicated at first, but it's actually much simpler than it seems. Instead of using long explanations, English speakers often use this short structure because it's quick, clear, and natural. It's one of those expressions that instantly makes your English sound more fluent because it's exactly how people explain choices they didn't make. Let's compare everything side by side. I can swim. That's present ability. I could swim when I was 5. That's past ability. Could you help me? That's a polite request. It could rain later. That's possibility. I could have called you, but I forgot. That's a missed opportunity in the past. Same word family, completely different jobs, depending on the situation. Here's a simple rule that will help you remember all of this. If you're talking about what you can do now, use can. If you're asking politely or talking about possibility, use could. And if you're talking about something that was possible in the past but didn't happen, use could have. Keep that one rule in mind, and you'll avoid most of the mistakes learners usually make. One thing you'll notice pretty quickly is that people don't usually describe themselves with long lists of adjectives. Instead of saying, I'm intelligent, funny, organized, and creative, they normally tell a short story that lets those qualities appear naturally. That's exactly what confident speakers do. They don't announce who they are. They show it through simple experiences and real examples. Imagine someone asks, "What's your personality like?" You could answer, "I'm pretty calm, but I'm also curious. I love learning new things, and I usually enjoy trying experiences I've never had before." Notice how natural that sounds. You're not trying to impress anyone. You're simply giving the other person a picture of who you are. Let's make that answer a little more interesting. You could add, "My friends usually say I'm a good listener. I don't always have the perfect advice, but I like being there when people need someone to talk to." That small detail immediately makes your English sound warmer and much more personal than simply saying, "I'm kind." Here's another useful expression. I've always been. Native speakers use it all the time. I've always been a little shy. I've always been curious about different cultures. I've always been the person who asks too many questions. This structure helps you describe personality traits that have been true for a long time. Now compare these two answers. I'm funny. Simple, but very flat. I love making people laugh, even if my jokes aren't always good. Which one sounds more natural? Definitely the second one. Real conversations are full of little examples like this. They help people connect with you instead of just collecting information. Let's hear a real example. Someone asks, "So, what are you like?" You smile and answer, "I'd say I'm quite relaxed. I don't stress too much about small problems, and I love spending time outdoors whenever I can." That feels like something a real person would actually say during a conversation, doesn't it? Here's another expression worth remembering. I'd say It's softer than simply saying, "I am." Listen to the difference. I'm very patient. I'd say I'm pretty patient. The second version sounds more humble, more thoughtful, and much closer to how people naturally describe themselves. You can also balance your personality by talking about strengths and weaknesses together. I'd say I'm organized, but sometimes I overthink things. Or, I'm outgoing once I get comfortable, but I'm usually quiet when I first meet people. These balanced answers feel honest, confident, and very natural in English. There's another expression you'll hear all the time. I'm more of a. Native speakers use it when they want to compare their preferences without sounding too strong. For example, I'm more of a morning person. I'm more of an introvert. I'm more of a listener than a talker. It's a soft, natural way to describe yourself, and it sounds much more conversational than simply saying, "I am." Let's hear it in context. Someone asks, "Do you enjoy big parties?" You smile and answer, "Honestly, I'm more of a small group person. I enjoy having long conversations with a few close friends instead of being in a huge crowd." Notice that you're not only describing your personality, you're explaining how it shows up in your everyday life. Here's another useful expression. It takes me a while to. This is perfect if you're naturally shy or reserved. It takes me a while to open up. It takes me a while to trust new people. It takes me a while to feel comfortable in a new environment. These sentences sound honest, confident, and much more natural than simply saying, "I'm shy." Let's compare two answers. I'm shy. End of conversation. Now listen to this one. It takes me a while to open up, but once I feel comfortable, I become much more talkative. That's a completely different impression. Instead of putting a label on yourself, you're helping the other person understand how you usually behave around people. Another phrase that sounds very natural is I get along with. For example, I usually get along with everyone at work. I get along really well with children. I've always gotten along with people from different cultures. This expression isn't exactly about personality, but it tells people a lot about the way you relate to others. Now let's imagine someone asks you to describe a close friend. You could say, she's one of the kindest people I know. She's always willing to help, and she never makes anyone feel left out. Notice how you're doing exactly what we talked about earlier. You're showing personality through actions instead of simply listing adjectives. The same idea works when talking about yourself. Instead of saying, I'm generous, you could say, I love helping people whenever I can. Instead of saying, I'm patient, try, I don't mind explaining something twice if it helps someone understand. Real English often sounds less like a definition and more like a collection of small stories. Here's something you'll notice if you listen carefully to podcasts or interviews in English. People rarely describe themselves in exactly the same way twice. Their words change depending on the situation, but their message stays the same. That's why memorizing one perfect answer isn't the goal. Learning flexible expressions is much more valuable. Let's talk about another situation where you'll need to describe your personality, making new friends. Imagine someone asks, so, tell me a little about yourself. Many learners immediately start talking about their job or where they're from. That's perfectly fine, but it's also a great opportunity to share something about the kind of person you are, not just the facts of your life. For example, you could say, I love spending time outdoors whenever I get the chance. Hiking, walking by the beach, or just sitting somewhere quiet helps me relax. You didn't use a single adjective like calm or relaxed, but people will naturally imagine those qualities just from the activities you enjoy. Here's another useful expression. Deep down, I'm. This one is slightly more personal and reflective. You might hear someone say, deep down, I'm still a very curious person. Or, deep down, I've always been a little adventurous. It's a beautiful expression because it suggests you're talking about who you really are beneath first impressions. Now let's compare two answers again. I'm confident. That's clear, but a little simple. Now listen to this. Deep down, I trust myself to figure things out, even when I don't have all the answers. That sounds much more authentic. Instead of giving yourself a label, you're describing the way you think and approach life. Another expression you'll hear quite often is, I've become more. Personality isn't fixed forever, and English speakers often talk about how they've changed over time. I've become more patient. I've become much more confident since I started working. I've become better at listening. This makes your answer feel real because it acknowledges growth. Let's imagine someone asks, have you always been outgoing? You could answer, not really. I've actually become much more confident over the last few years. I used to be very quiet, but little by little I started feeling more comfortable speaking to new people. That's exactly the kind of answer you'll hear in real conversations and interviews. One thing I really like about English is that people often describe personality as something flexible, not permanent. Instead of saying, I'm shy, they might say, I'm a little shy at first. Instead of, I'm nervous, they'll say, I get nervous before presentations. Those small changes make your English sound much more natural because they leave room for change. Let's look at another common question. What are you like under pressure? This comes up surprisingly often, especially in job interviews. Instead of giving a one-word answer, try explaining how you usually react. I usually stay calm and focus on finding a solution. Or, I like taking a moment to think before making a decision. Those answers sound much more natural than simply saying, I'm calm. Here's another expression that sounds very conversational. People often describe me as, for example, people often describe me as easygoing. Or, people often describe me as someone who's always willing to help. This is a nice way to describe yourself because it feels less like you're praising yourself and more like you're sharing how other people see you. Before we finish, I want you to remember one simple idea. Your personality isn't something you memorize in English. It's something you express. The words we talked about today are just tools to help people understand who you are. And the more you use them, the more natural they'll become. Don't worry about sounding perfect. Focus on sounding honest, because that's what people connect with. Here's a little challenge for you. Think of 3 words that describe your personality and try using them in a complete sentence. Maybe you're outgoing, maybe you're quiet, maybe you're adventurous or a little shy. Whatever the words are, make them yours. Speaking English isn't about becoming someone different. It's about being yourself in another language. Thanks so much for listening. I hope today's episode gave you a few new ways to talk about yourself with confidence. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a new episode of Softly Spoken English. Until next time, keep practicing, keep speaking, and most importantly, be yourself. I'll see you in the next episode.